Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. Ethan Ward gripped the porcelain mug, his fingers tracing the rim as he stared at the dark liquid within. The aroma of fresh coffee wafted through his modern kitchen, a scent that had become synonymous with his carefully structured mornings. At 38, he had built his life on precision and control, traits that made him one of the city's most sought-after architects. His reflection in the stainless steel refrigerator caught his attention. Dark circles under his eyes, skin paler than usual. The fatigue had been creeping in for months now, along with waves of nausea that seemed to intensify each passing week. He took a sip of coffee, grimacing at the slight metallic aftertaste that lingered on his tongue. "You should see Dr. Langley again," Naomi said, her voice carrying a note of concern as she entered the kitchen. She wore her designer workout gear, her dark hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail. "You're looking worse, darling." Ethan observed his wife's movements as she prepared her morning smoothie. At 32, Naomi Perez Ward commanded attention wherever she went. Her presence filled rooms, turned heads, and right now, she was watching him with what appeared to be genuine worry in her green eyes. "I saw Mark last week," Ethan replied, setting down his mug. "He adjusted my prescription again. Says it's just stress from the Kenwood project." Naomi approached him, running her manicured fingers through his dark hair. "Maybe you should take a break. The firm can handle things without you for a few days." The touch of her hand triggered a memory. His parents' funeral 25 years ago. 10-year-old Ethan standing beside their graves, understanding for the first time that safety was an illusion. The construction accident that claimed their lives had taught him that control was the only shield against chaos. "I'm fine," he said, moving away from her touch. "The new medication should kick in soon." His phone buzzed. A message from Jonas Cole, his personal trainer. "Session at 6 p.m. today. Need to work on those core muscles, boss." Ethan typed a quick response. "Not today. Still feeling under the weather." "I can stop by the gym and cancel for you," Naomi offered a little too quickly. "I'm heading there anyway for my morning session with Jonas." Ethan noted the slight flush in her cheeks, the way she avoided his direct gaze. "That's thoughtful of you," he said, his tone neutral. The day proceeded as usual. Ethan buried himself in blueprints and client meetings, ignoring the persistent nausea and dizziness. His firm, Ward Architecture, had grown from a small startup to a major player in urban development. Today's focus was a revolutionary sustainable housing project that would reshape the city skyline. At 8:47 p.m., his phone rang. The caller ID displayed Father Sinclair. "Mr. Ward." The priest's voice trembled slightly. "I need to speak with you. It's urgent. Can you come to Holy Trinity Church right away?" Ethan detected the strain in the older man's tone. "Is everything all right, Father? Please, just come. Some matters, they can only be discussed in person." 20 minutes later, Ethan pulled up to Holy Trinity Church. The Gothic structure loomed against the night sky, its stained glass windows dark except for a single light in the vestibule. Father Sinclair waited at the entrance, his weathered face drawn with tension. "Thank you for coming," the priest said, leading Ethan through the empty church. The smell of incense hung heavy in the air. "What I'm about to do, it goes against everything I believe in, but I cannot remain silent. Not when a life is at stake." They entered the priest's office, a small room lined with religious texts and family photographs. Father Sinclair closed the door and sank into his chair, his hands trembling as he reached for an envelope on his desk. "Your grandmother was a dear friend," he began. "She asked me to watch over you before she passed. I failed her by waiting this long to speak." "What are you talking about?" Ethan asked, his architect's mind already analyzing the priest's nervous behavior, cataloging every detail. Father Sinclair pushed the envelope across the desk. "Yesterday, your wife came to confession. What she revealed." He paused, crossing himself. "The seal of confession is sacred, but there are times when the sin is so grave that silence becomes complicity." Ethan opened the envelope with steady hands. Inside was a handwritten letter, Naomi's distinctive script flowing across the page. As he read, his expression remained unchanged, but his grip on the paper tightened. "She's been poisoning me," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. The priest nodded miserably. "Arsenic in your coffee. Small doses, building up over months. Dr. Langley has been helping her, prescribing placebos, monitoring the poisoning's progress. They're planning to finish it at Christmas, make it look like an accident." He pulled out more papers, receipts for poison purchases, bank statements showing transfers to an offshore account in Dr. Langley's name. "There's more," Father Sinclair continued. "She's been having an affair with your trainer, Jonas Cole. They're planning to marry after your death. The insurance policy." "When did she take out the policy?" Ethan interrupted. 3 months ago. $5 million. Double payout for accidental death." Ethan studied the documents, his mind already forming connections, plotting angles like the complex structures he designed. "Thank you, Father. You've done the right thing. What will you do?" "What's necessary?" Ethan stood, tucking the envelope into his jacket. "This conversation never happened. You haven't broken any sacred trusts today." The priest watched him leave, crossing himself again. In Ethan's measured steps and rigid posture, he recognized something that chilled him more than Naomi's confession: the calm calculation of a man preparing for war. In his car, Ethan reviewed the evidence again. The architect in him appreciated the elegant simplicity of their plan. The husband in him felt nothing but cold fury. He started the engine, his mind already drafting blueprints for a different kind of design, one that would bring his would-be murderer's world crashing down around them. The following morning, Ethan sat in his home office, spreading out the contents of Father Sinclair's envelope across his mahogany desk. Each piece of evidence was a component in the structure of betrayal: bank statements, poison receipts, love notes between Naomi and Jonas exchanged through a secret email account. He arranged them with the same precision he used when laying out architectural plans. A knock at the door interrupted his analysis. "Come in," he called, quickly gathering the documents. Naomi entered, wearing a silk robe, her hair slightly mussed from sleep. "You were gone when I woke up," she said, moving behind his chair to massage his shoulders. "Another early meeting. Had to check on the Kenwood site," he lied smoothly, noting how her fingers paused briefly at his response. "The foundation work starts today." "You work too hard," she murmured, her lips brushing his ear. "I worry about you, especially with how sick you've been lately." Ethan turned to face her, studying the concern in her expression. 3 years of marriage, and he'd never noticed how well she wore her masks. "I got you something," he said, reaching into his desk drawer. He pulled out a small box from Cartier. Naomi's eyes lit up as she opened it, revealing a diamond tennis bracelet. "Ethan, it's beautiful, but what's the occasion?" "Do I need one?" He fastened the bracelet around her wrist, remembering Father Sinclair's words about the Christmas plan. "I thought you could wear it to the cabin this winter." Her hand trembled slightly. "The cabin? For Christmas? You mentioned wanting to get away, just the two of us." "Yes, of course." She recovered quickly, kissing his cheek. "It's perfect. I have to run. Meeting my trainer." Ethan watched her leave, then picked up his phone. "Leo, I need your services. It's a delicate matter." An hour later, Ethan sat across from Leo Cruz in a quiet corner of a downtown cafe. The former police officer's weathered face remained impassive as Ethan laid out the situation. "You want me to dig into all 3 of them?" Leo asked, making notes in his small notebook. "Everything. Financial records, communications, movements. I want to know every skeleton in their closets." Ethan passed him a thick envelope. "This should cover the initial investigation. What about your wife's family? The Perez family? Include them. I need to understand what shaped her." Over the next few days, Ethan maintained his routine while gathering intelligence. He installed hidden cameras throughout their house, placed a tracker on Naomi's car, and added spyware to her devices. Each evening, he reviewed the footage, building a comprehensive picture of her betrayal. The gym footage was particularly revealing. Jonas Hammercole carried himself with the arrogance of a man who thought he'd won life's lottery. Ethan observed their interactions during Naomi's training sessions, the lingering touches, the private jokes, the way they gravitated toward each other when they thought no one was watching. Leo's initial reports filled in more gaps. Naomi's childhood in a middle-class family had been marked by her mother's constant social climbing and her father's gambling debts. She'd reinvented herself in college, using her beauty and charm to move in wealthy circles. Jonas, despite his confident exterior, was drowning in debt from failed business ventures and gambling. Dr. Mark Langley's history proved most interesting. 2 malpractice suits settled out of court, a suspension for prescribing controlled substances without proper documentation, and a lifestyle well beyond a physician's typical means. Your wife approached Langley 3 months before the poisoning began, Leo reported during their next meeting. She knew about his financial troubles and offered him a way out. The offshore account receives regular payments from a shell company registered in her maiden name. Ethan nodded, adding this information to his mental blueprint. And the insurance policy. Taken out through a broker who's handled similar policies, all ending in suspicious deaths. The broker's connected to Langley through a golf club membership. They meet twice a month, always in private rooms. A text message interrupted their discussion. It was from his sister, Elena. Haven't heard from you in weeks. Coming by the bakery today. Ethan stared at the message, feeling a pang of guilt. Ellie had always been his strongest supporter, especially after their parents' death. But he couldn't risk involving her. Not yet. I need more time, he texted back. Big project deadline. You okay? You seemed off at Sunday dinner. Just tired. Talk soon. At home that evening, Ethan reviewed the day's surveillance footage. Naomi had spent 3 hours at the gym, though only 45 minutes involved actual training. The rest was spent in Jonas's office, the camera catching their passionate encounters. In the kitchen footage, he watched her prepare his evening coffee, adding a clear liquid from a small vial she kept in a hidden compartment of her jewelry box. The front door opened, announcing Naomi's return. Ethan quickly switched off the monitors and opened a set of blueprints. Still working? She asked, entering his office. She wore her workout clothes, her skin glowing from exertion. I brought you coffee from that place you like. Ethan accepted the cup, pretending to take a sip. Thanks. How was your workout? Intense. Jonas is pushing me hard. She perched on his desk, her leg brushing against his arm. Dr. Langley called. He wants to adjust your medication again. I'll see him tomorrow, Ethan replied, noticing how she leaned forward, giving him a view of her cleavage. Her seduction techniques were flawless, he had to admit. Want to have dinner out tonight? That new French place you mentioned. I'd love to, but I promised Mother I'd help with her charity event planning. She kissed him lightly. Rain check. After she left, Ethan poured the coffee into a sample container for testing. His phone buzzed with another report from Leo. The charity event didn't exist. Naomi had booked a hotel room under her maiden name. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his mind churning with possibilities. They thought they were the architects of his destruction, but they'd built their plans on a false foundation. He would let them continue, watching as they added each new floor to their house of lies. Soon, they would learn what happened when you betrayed an architect who'd learned early that the most dangerous designs looked perfectly safe until the moment they collapsed. The late afternoon sun streaked through the windows of Ethan's downtown office as he refined his plans. On his computer screen, blueprints for the Christmas cabin trip slowly took shape, not the cozy romantic getaway Naomi envisioned, but something far more calculated. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Ward, your sister is here to see you. Ethan glanced at the security feed, seeing Elena waiting in reception, a box from her bakery in her hands. He quickly closed the cabin plans. Send her in. Elena Ramirez entered with the whirlwind energy that characterized her movements. At 32, she shared Ethan's dark hair and sharp features, though her expression danced with emotion where his remained controlled. "You're avoiding me," she declared, setting the box on his desk. "So I brought your favorite chocolate croissants, and I'm not leaving until you tell me what's wrong." "Nothing's wrong," Ethan replied, but Elena's raised eyebrow showed she wasn't buying it. "Cut the act, Hermano. You've lost weight. You look exhausted, and Naomi's been acting stranger than usual." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Is it about the trainer?" Ethan's attention sharpened. "What about him?" "I saw them last week at Cafe Aurora. Way too close for a trainer and client. I wanted to tell you, but—" She trailed off, studying his face. "You already knew." "Sit down, Ellie." Ethan walked to his office door, closing it firmly. "What I'm about to tell you stays between us. I need your eyes and ears, but you can't let anyone know you're watching." For the next hour, Ethan shared a carefully edited version of the truth, enough to explain his behavior without revealing the full scope of Naomi's betrayal. He couldn't risk Ellie's protective instincts leading her to confront Naomi directly. "That woman," Ellie spat when he finished. "Want me to poison her coffee? I've got some interesting ingredients in my kitchen." Despite everything, Ethan felt a smile tugging at his lips. "No poisoning. I need you to be my eyes in places I can't watch. Society events, charity functions, anywhere Naomi might let her guard down." "You're planning something," Ellie observed. "Something big. The less you know, the better. Just trust me." Ellie studied him for a long moment. "Just promise me one thing. Make her suffer." After Elena left, Ethan returned to his planning. The pieces were falling into place. Leo's investigations had revealed that Jonas's gym was hemorrhaging money, and Dr. Langley had recently inquired about properties in non-extradition countries. They were getting nervous, which meant they might rush their timeline. His phone chimed with a text from Naomi. "Dinner at home tonight. I'll cook your favorite." "Looking forward to it," he responded, then opened his email to send a message to his private investigator. "Leo, need eyes on Langley's office tomorrow morning. Wife making unexpected dinner plans. They might be moving up the schedule." That evening, Ethan arrived home to find Naomi in the kitchen, preparing his favorite pasta dish. She wore a new dress that highlighted her curves, her hair styled exactly the way he preferred. "You're home early," she said, greeting him with a kiss. "Feeling better?" "Much better." Ethan accepted the glass of wine she offered, watching as she returned to the stove. "Actually, I've been thinking about our Christmas plans." Naomi's hand paused briefly as she stirred the sauce. "Oh, why wait? I've cleared my schedule for next week. I found this amazing place, somewhere different from our usual spots, more private." The silence on the other end lasted a few seconds too long. "Next week. But what about your projects? The Kenwood development?" "Can wait," Ethan interrupted smoothly. "You've been right all along. I need a break, and who better to spend it with than my wife?" He paused, then added, "I thought we could invite Jonas along too. He's been helpful with my recovery program." Through the hidden feed, he watched Naomi's hand freeze on her glass. "Jonas, are you sure that's appropriate?" "Why not? He's been instrumental in keeping me healthy despite my condition. Besides, he mentioned wanting to expand his client base. This could be good networking for him." "That's thoughtful of you," Naomi managed. "Let me check my schedule and get back to you." After hanging up, Ethan turned to his computer and pulled up the property details he purchased through a shell corporation. The abandoned industrial site sat isolated on 50 acres of land, its main structure a converted barn that he'd spent weeks modifying. He clicked through the security camera feeds he'd installed throughout the property, checking each angle and blind spot. His phone buzzed with a message from Leo. Dr. Langley just made 3 calls in succession. Wife, trainer, and an unlisted number. "Want me to trace it?" "Follow the unlisted number. Record everything," Ethan replied. He switched to another screen, watching the real-time feed from Dr. Langley's office. The doctor paced his private room, phone pressed to his ear. "This is moving too fast." Langley's voice came through clearly. "We haven't tested the new compound. If the dosage is wrong, then fix it." Naomi's voice cut in. "You're supposed to be the expert. Ethan's never been this suspicious before. We need to act now. And your boy toy. Is he ready?" "Jonas will do what I tell him. Just make sure you have everything prepared by next week." Ethan replayed the conversation, noting every detail. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was Jonas. "Hey man, Naomi mentioned the trip. Sounds great. Need any specific equipment?" Ethan typed back, "Just bring yourself. I've got everything else covered." He smiled coldly at the phone. They thought they were manipulating him, never suspecting they were walking into a trap of his own design. He pulled out Father Sinclair's envelope, reviewing the evidence one final time. The priest's warning had given him the advantage, allowing him to turn their own plot against them. The morning of the trip arrived with a sense of anticipation. Ethan loaded the last of their luggage into his SUV, watching as Naomi emerged from their house wearing a designer travel outfit that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Jonas pulled up in his sports car, all confident smiles and expensive cologne. "Thanks for including me, man," Jonas said, clapping Ethan on the shoulder. "Been wanting to show you some new techniques." "I'm sure you have," Ethan replied, noting how Jonas's hand lingered on Naomi's waist as he helped her into the car. The drive took 3 hours, each mile taking them farther from civilization. Ethan observed his passengers through the rearview mirror, catching their subtle glances and hidden touches. They grew more nervous as the landscape became increasingly remote. "Are you sure this is the right way?" Naomi asked, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her phone screen. "There's no signal out here." "That's the point," Ethan said. "Complete privacy. No distractions." They turned onto a gravel road that led to the converted barn. The structure rose before them, its weathered exterior masking the sophisticated technology hidden within. Ethan parked and led them inside, watching their reactions. "It's rustic," Naomi managed, her disdain evident. "Just wait," Ethan assured her. "I've made some improvements." He showed them to their rooms, separate ones, of course. The moment they were settled, he retreated to his control room hidden behind the barn's old office. Multiple screens displayed feeds from throughout the building. Naomi and Jonas didn't waste time. Within 20 minutes, they met in the main room, speaking in hushed voices. "This place gives me the creeps," Jonas muttered. "Why couldn't we stick to the original plan?" "Because this is better," Naomi snapped. "No witnesses, no questions. Langley said the new compound will look like a heart attack. Quick and clean." Ethan's fingers moved across the control panel. The room's lights dimmed slightly, and a barely audible hum filled the air. On the screens, he watched Jonas shift uncomfortably. "Did you hear that?" Jonas asked. "You're being paranoid," Naomi said, though her voice held a note of uncertainty. Ethan pressed another button. Through hidden speakers, their own voices began to play, recordings from months of surveillance. "God, he's so pathetic," Naomi's voice echoed through the room. "Just drink your coffee, darling. Doctor's orders." Jonas's laughter followed. "The great architect can't even tell his wife's poisoning him. Some genius." The color drained from their faces as the conversations continued to play. Ethan switched to the projectors, and suddenly the barn's walls came alive with images. Naomi adding poison to his coffee, their intimate moments in Jonas's office, Dr. Langley accepting envelopes of cash. What the hell? Jonas spun around, trying to track the source of the images. "How? You really should be more careful about where you conduct your affairs." Ethan's voice came through the speakers, calm and cold. "Modern security cameras are remarkably sophisticated." Naomi's composure cracked. "Ethan, what is this?" "This is your performance review." More images appeared, bank statements, insurance policies, medical reports. I must say, your attention to detail was impressive. Shame about Father Sinclair's crisis of conscience. The priest, Naomi whispered. He told you. He saved my life. Unlike my loving wife. He actually has a conscience. Ethan's voice hardened. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? That I would just lie down and die for your convenience? Jonas made a dash for the door, but it was already locked. Let us out. Why? Ethan asked. We're just getting to the good part. He switched to the next set of recordings, their detailed planning of his murder, complete with timestamps and dates. I especially enjoyed your creative ideas for my accident. Very imaginative. Through the cameras, he watched them try every door, becoming increasingly frantic as they realized they were trapped. Naomi's perfect makeup began to smear as she searched for an escape route. Ethan, please, she called out. We can explain. Explain the arsenic in my coffee, the fake prescriptions, or perhaps you'd like to explain the offshore account you set up with my money. Each question was accompanied by corresponding evidence projected onto the walls. Don't waste your breath, Naomi. I have everything. Dr. Langley was quite helpful once Leo started investigating his finances. Jonas's face contorted with rage. He grabbed a chair, hurling it at one of the projectors. You think you can trap us here? I'll tear this place apart. Feel free to try. But first, Ethan pressed another button, and new images appeared. Jonas's gambling debts, his failed business ventures, his other affairs. Let's discuss your own betrayals, shall we? Naomi turned to Jonas, her eyes narrowing. You were going to kill me too, after everything I promised you. Trust. Ethan's laugh held no humor. Let's talk about trust, Naomi. Wedding vows. Promises of loyalty. How you smiled at me each morning while poisoning my coffee. The barn's lights shifted, creating a harsh spotlight effect. More evidence appeared. Detailed toxicology reports, bank transfers, phone records, each piece of proof accompanied by dates and timestamps, forming an irrefutable timeline of their betrayal. The police are already moving on Langley, Ethan informed them. He's being arrested as we speak. Detective Hayes is particularly interested in his client list. It seems you two weren't his only customers seeking convenient accidents. Jonas slammed his fists against the walls, searching for a way into Ethan's control room. You can't do this. We have rights. Rights? Ethan's voice turned sharp. Like my right to live. My right to trust my wife. My right to believe my doctor was actually treating me. He paused, letting his words sink in. But you're correct about one thing. You do have rights. You have the right to remain silent. Detective Hayes will be here soon to explain the rest. From the screens, Ethan watched their final attempts to escape, to bargain, to threaten. Each outburst was recorded, each confession captured for the prosecution. He had designed this trap not just to expose their crimes, but to break their spirits, to make them face the full weight of their betrayal. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the air. On his monitors, Ethan saw police vehicles approaching the property. Detective Hayes' car in the lead. He pressed a final button, and all the exits except the main door unlocked. That would be your escort arriving, he announced. I suggest you use these last few moments to decide how much prison time you're willing to serve for each other. From what I understand, attempted murder carries quite a sentence. The converted barn stood silent in the aftermath of Ethan's revenge. He moved through the space, disconnecting surveillance equipment and wiping down surfaces. No celebrations, no gloating, just the same precise attention to detail that had characterized his trap's construction. Detective Rachel Hayes leaned against her car, watching him work. You've thought of everything, she said. 3 cameras in the southeast corner. Ethan handed her a hard drive. More footage for your case file. You do realize they'll try to use this against you? She asked, gesturing at the elaborate setup. The defense will say this proves premeditation, that you lured them here. They were planning to murder me at Christmas. I simply provided an alternate venue for their plot to unfold. Everything here is documented, legal, and witnessed by law enforcement. Smart. Hayes examined the surveillance equipment. But Naomi's family has money. They'll hire the best defense attorneys. Let them. The evidence speaks for itself. 2 weeks later, Ethan sat in his lawyer's office, reviewing the charges against Naomi, Jonas, and Dr. Langley. Attempted murder, conspiracy, medical malpractice, fraud. The list filled several pages. They're offering a plea deal, his lawyer said, sliding a document across the desk. Langley's willing to testify against the others in exchange for leniency. Ethan read the terms, his expression unchanging. No deals. I want them all to face a jury. It'll be a media circus. Your private life, your past, everything will be exposed. Good. Ethan set down the paper. Let them try to justify attempting to poison me in my own home. Let them explain the life insurance policy, the offshore accounts, the fraudulent prescriptions. I have nothing to hide. The first preliminary hearing proved Ethan right. Naomi appeared in designer prison garb, her mask of sophistication cracking as the prosecution presented their evidence. Her lawyer attempted to paint her as a victim of manipulation by Jonas and Langley. My client was coerced, the defense attorney argued. Mr. Cole and Dr. Langley took advantage of her vulnerable state, her husband's emotional distance. Objection, Your Honor. The prosecutor interrupted. The evidence clearly shows Mrs. Ward was the primary architect of this conspiracy. Judge Harris, a stern man with graying temples, reviewed the surveillance footage. Objection sustained. The defendant's own recorded statements indicate she initiated the murder plot. From his seat in the gallery, Ethan watched Naomi's composure crumble as her own words played through the courtroom speakers. Just a few more weeks. Ethan's accident will pay for everything we've ever wanted. During a recess, Alina gripped his arm. You okay? Hermano. Hearing all this can't be easy. I'm fine. Ethan's voice held no emotion. They're doing exactly what I expected, trying to justify attempted murder by painting themselves as victims. The jury sees through it, Ellie assured him. The way Naomi keeps changing her story, how Jonas tries to blame everyone else. Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of Naomi's mother, Bianca Perez. The society matron's expensive suit couldn't hide her desperate anger. You're destroying my daughter's life, she hissed at Ethan. All because you couldn't give her the attention she deserved. Ethan regarded her coldly. Your daughter tried to poison me. The only thing I'm destroying is her plan to get away with murder. She's young. She made a mistake. A mistake. Ethan's voice could have frozen fire. She spent months watching me grow sick, pretending to care while plotting my death. That's not a mistake, Mrs. Perez. That's premeditated murder. The trial resumed with Jonas's testimony. The former trainer's muscled frame seemed diminished in his prison jumpsuit as he tried to distance himself from the conspiracy. Naomi said it would be easy, he testified. Ethan was so focused on his work, he never noticed anything. She handled all the details. I just played along. Played along. The prosecutor's voice dripped skepticism. Mr. Cole, we have recordings of you discussing murder methods with Dr. Langley. Was that just playing along too? Jonas's facade cracked. You don't understand. She promised me everything. Money, status, a new life. Said once Ethan was gone, we'd never have to worry about anything again. And that justified murder. Jonas slumped in defeat. No, it didn't. The jury took less than 6 hours to return their verdict. Judge Harris' courtroom fell silent as the foreman stood. On the charge of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, how do you find the defendant, Naomi Perez Ward? Guilty. Jonas Cole. Guilty. Dr. Mark Langley. Guilty. Additional verdicts followed. Guilty on all counts for all 3 defendants. Ethan sat motionless as Judge Harris prepared to announce the sentences, his expression revealing nothing. Mrs. Ward, Harris began, his voice heavy with authority. Your actions represent a profound betrayal of trust. You plotted the death of your husband with cold calculation, showing no remorse even now. 25 years. Naomi's perfect composure finally shattered. She collapsed in tears as guards led her away. Mr. Cole, Harris continued, you claim to be a victim of manipulation. Yet evidence shows you were an eager participant in attempted murder. 20 years. Jonas stared blankly ahead, his dreams of wealth and status evaporating. Dr. Langley, Harris said, turning to the disgraced physician, you violated your oath, using your position to facilitate murder. 15 years and permanent revocation of your medical license. After the sentencing, reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. Ethan moved through them without comment, leaving his lawyer to handle official statements. He had no interest in public spectacle. The evidence had spoken for itself. Back in his office, he found Detective Hayes waiting. Quite a result, she said. The DA's calling it a landmark case for premeditated murder conspiracy. Justice served. Ethan turned to his latest architectural plans. They tried to kill me slowly, watching me suffer while pretending to care. Now, they face the consequences. Later that evening, Father Sinclair visited Ethan's office. The elderly priest seemed burdened despite the verdict. I needed to know, he said, was breaking the seal of confession worth the cost to my soul? Ethan set aside his work. You prevented a murder, Father. Isn't that worth any spiritual price? Perhaps. The priest managed a small smile. You show remarkable strength, facing all this without hatred. Hatred requires emotional investment, Ethan replied. I prefer clarity. They tried to kill me. I ensure they failed and faced justice. Nothing more. The media attention gradually faded. Ethan focused on his work, expanding ward architecture into new territories. He declined interview requests, letting the court records tell the story. Elena remained a constant presence, though she worried about his emotional state. You never talk about it, she said one evening over dinner. About how their betrayal made you feel. Feel? Ethan considered the question. I feel satisfaction that justice was served. That's enough. Is it? You've become even more guarded since it happened. I've become more aware, he corrected, of the importance of control, of never letting emotion cloud judgment. He stood, moving to his office window. Below, the city stretched out, its lights marking points of civilization in the darkness. His latest project, a revolutionary sustainable housing complex, was taking shape on the horizon. Look at that skyline, Ellie. Each building represents countless calculations, precise measurements, careful planning. One mistake in the foundation can bring down the entire structure. And that's how you see life now. All calculations and planning. I see it clearly. Ethan's reflection showed no weakness, no regret. They thought they could destroy me. Instead, they destroyed themselves. The media dubbed it the architect's revenge, a story of betrayal, poison, and ruthless justice. But Ethan had moved beyond revenge. He had faced betrayal's abyss and emerged stronger, colder, more focused. His new projects garnered international attention. Clients sought him out not just for his architectural brilliance, but for his reputation for absolute control. The serpent was dead, its venom transformed into the foundation of his future. Ethan Ward had not just survived. He had rebuilt himself, stronger than before, leaving the ruins of betrayal behind. He opened a new set of blueprints. The past was settled, measured in years of prison sentences and shattered reputations. The future awaited his design, and this time, no one would dare sabotage his plans. 10 years later, Ethan Ward stood atop the Ward Tower, his latest architectural achievement dominating the city skyline. At 48, his dark hair now carried streaks of silver at the temples, but his posture remained rigid, his gaze as sharp as ever. The past decade had transformed Ward architecture into a global empire, with projects spanning 3 continents. Mr. Ward, his assistant's voice came through the intercom. Detective Hayes is here to see you. Send her up." Rachel Hayes, now a police captain, emerged from the elevator. Time had added authority to her bearing, though her analytical mind was still as keen as when she'd handled the infamous poisoning case. "Quite a view," she said, joining him at the window. "Your empire keeps growing. What brings you here, Captain?" "Naomi's up for parole next month." Hayes watched his reflection in the glass. "Given your influence, the board wants your input." Ethan turned from the window, moving to his desk. "Has she shown remorse?" "She claims to be reformed, started a prison ministry, counsels other inmates, still maintains you drove her to it, but she's gotten better at hiding her true nature. The same way she hid her plans to poison me." Ethan's voice held no emotion as he reviewed the parole documents. "Has she contacted Jonas?" "No. Jonas Cole was denied parole last year. He's not handling prison well, got into 3 fights, tried to manipulate younger inmates. The board saw right through him, and Langley. Dead," Hayes said. "Heart attack in his cell 6 months ago. No one claimed the body." Ethan nodded, unsurprised. The former doctor had been the weakest link, the first to break under pressure. His death was an unremarkable end to an unremarkable life. "I'll submit my statement to the parole board," Ethan said, closing the file. "They should understand that some serpents never lose their venom." After Hayes left, Ethan reviewed his calendar. His sister Elena's bakery chain was opening its 20th location next week, and she had turned her small business into a thriving franchise. He still recalled the days she sold pastries out of a single storefront. The intercom buzzed again. "Mr. Ward, Father Vargas is here for your monthly meeting." Father Vargas had taken over Holy Trinity Church after Father Sinclair's passing 5 years ago. The elderly priest had died peacefully, finally at ease with his decision to save a life rather than remain silent. Ethan had ensured the church received an anonymous donation large enough to renovate its aging structure and establish a youth education program. "Send him in." The young priest entered, carrying a familiar envelope. "The latest reports from the prison ministry. You were right. She's been writing letters." Ethan examined the intercepted correspondence. After her conviction, Naomi had tried to maintain connections with wealthy figures, hoping for support in appeals and early release. Most had abandoned her, unwilling to associate with a convicted would-be murderer. "She's persistent," Father Vargas noted, still trying to spin the story her way. "Some people never change, Father. They just adapt their performance to a new audience." Later that afternoon, Ethan visited Elena's flagship bakery. She greeted him with a hug and a worried glance. "You look tired, hermano. When's the last time you took a break?" "The Dubai project launches next month. After that, maybe." Elena wiped flour from her hands. "I saw the news about Naomi's parole hearing. You okay?" "Why wouldn't I be?" "Because the woman who tried to murder you might get released." Elena's voice carried a decade of protective anger. "The press will start circling again. They love dragging up the past." "Let them." Ethan sipped his coffee, a gesture that had taken years to reclaim after the poisoning. "The truth is already written in court records and prison sentences." Detective Sarah Chun, Hayes' prodigy, arrived with updates on hidden assets Naomi had tried to stash away. More letters from prison revealed Naomi's ongoing attempts to manipulate other inmates, coaching them on playing the parole board. Chun shook her head. "She's still performing, just for a different audience." "The parole board needs to see these," Elena insisted. "They will," Ethan said calmly, the quiet authority in his voice unchanged over the years, along with everything else she's tried to hide. That evening, as sunset painted his office in amber hues, Ethan reviewed architectural plans for his next project, a secure residential complex designed for people who'd survived domestic betrayals. The irony was not lost on him. His phone lit up with a text from Hayes. "Ward received your statement. Preliminary response to just parole is unlikely. Some things can't be forgiven." Ethan set down his phone, turning to the city view. A decade had passed since he'd transformed from victim to victor, since he'd turned a murder plot into a weapon against its conspirators. He'd built an empire on the foundations of that triumph, each success another layer of protection against future betrayals. The serpent was long dead, but its lesson lived on in steel and glass, in careful plans and calculated distances. Ethan Ward had not just survived, he had thrived, turning trauma into triumph, betrayal into empire. His intercom buzzed one last time. "Mr. Ward, the board for the Jakarta project is ready for your presentation." "On my way," Ethan said, gathering his designs, ready to shape another piece of the future he'd fought to keep. The past might echo in true crime podcasts and parole hearings, but his focus remained on building monuments to survival that would outlast all attempts at destruction. The sun set on another day in his reconstructed life, the city lights below twinkling like stars. Somewhere in a prison cell, Naomi plotted and planned, but her venom had long since lost its power. Ethan Ward had transformed it into foundation stone, building a legacy no betrayal could topple. The architect's revenge had become the architect's victory, and that victory would stand as long as his towers reached toward the sky. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.